How about number 3 newsmaker, Rex? That is Brian Rolapp, the new CEO of the PGA Tour. Was announced in June. We have not seen or heard all that much from him in the past 6 months, but it's pretty clear that his impact is already being felt at HQ.
And I can't overstate how much of a sea change this is for the PGA Tour. And you not only Rolapp, but just the idea that the PGA Tour is now a for-profit. And whatever the romantic ideas of what you thought the PGA Tour was before, as a charity, as someone who did good in the community, those have sailed. Bye-bye, nice moment. That's not an option anymore. And I'm not even being critical of that. I think in this moment in time, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it, I'm not quite sure who's qualified to negotiate a $1 billion international deal as it applies to Live Golf and the professional public investment fund. However, Brian Rolapp seems like the guy I would want in that chair. By all accounts, you talk to anybody who's either met him or known him from his past life in the NFL, he's really good at all the things the PGA Tour needs right now, and that is a for-profit model. That's someone who understands that the investors, SSG and private equity, not want a return on their investment. They're going to get a return on their investment. So that means the PGA Tour model has to move around quite a bit. I will say that Brian has done a really good job of being in that chair for the first few months. He sort of consolidated all the people around him. Most importantly, Tiger Woods. He made Tiger Woods the chair of this future competitions committee, and he put him in charge of the idea of what the PGA Tour should become from a competitive model to make it a better business model. That was brilliant. If for no other reason than whatever Tiger says in a room, and there was a meeting in the Bahamas during the Hero World Challenge, and Brian Rolapp ran that meeting. He made the presentation to all the players in the field at Albany, but it was Tiger Woods who was standing behind him and answering questions occasionally. And that's the person that Brian had to have behind him. But make no mistake, Brian Rolapp is very much a New York NFL Shield person. This is all about profit. This is all about making the product as good as you possibly can make it on the field. And the idea that the PGA Tour is going to be this mom and pop shop that goes to these small markets and is a big influence in these little tiny towns, that's not going to happen anymore. I was told on numerous occasions that the PGA Tour is in 5 of the top 30 markets right now in the United States. That's not sustainable, and that's not going to be the future.
Yeah, and look, that's why I think that this is a really exciting time to follow this tour, because you are bringing in, as you mentioned, a golf outsider from the strongest and most powerful entity in the American sports market. And Brian Rolapp is not promising little nip and tucks. Like, this is a full cosmetic makeover. These are seismic changes, even if you could argue, Rex, whether that's actually needed. Right now, you have sponsors who are more than willing to pay for tournaments basically every single week of the entire calendar. What Brian Rolapp is promising to do is going to be disruptive. Players might and probably will balk at some of his ideas. Sponsors and tournament directors and media partners are probably going to get squeezed by what is going to unfold over the next couple of months and the next couple of years. But Brian Rolapp has already demonstrated, in at least the limited front-facing roles that we have seen him, to be a really impressive leader who is laying out a vision, who, yes, you could quibble with some of the details. It does make some sense with the tenets that he is promising, with simplicity and parity and scarcity for what the tour can and should transform into. My question for you is, this is a player-run organization with the PGA Tour. This is a tour now that has financial backing from the Strategic Sports Group, which had a $1.5 billion, that's yes, with a B, investment. How much power does Brian Rolapp actually have in terms of transforming the PGA Tour into his vision?
Oh, I think alongside Tiger Woods, he's the ultimate power. SSG picked him. Arthur Blank, who was on the search committee, essentially handpicked him simply because of the work.
The owner of the Falcons. Yeah.
Owner of the Falcons. He's a member of the SSG group that, as you pointed out, invested $1.5 billion. This is an important element. They went out of their way to make sure they had their guy in that job. And you go back to Brian Rolapp's job to do an origin story here. He did all the things at the NFL that the PGA Tour really needs right now. New media rights deals where you maximize the product, just not on TV, but across all the platforms, because you and I both have talked about this. The landscape is going to change very, very quickly for all of sports, just not golf. And I believe professional golf is a little bit behind on this front. So he's the right guy on that front. He also ran all of the investments for the NFL. The idea that he was the guy that took all the money from the guys who have the money and invested it in the things he thought was important. He now has $1.5 billion to do that for the PGA Tour. He alluded to this in the first press conference, in the first chance I had to talk with him at the Travelers Championship when he was introduced as the new CEO, where that's the part that intrigued him the most, because he's got ideas. He hasn't spent a lot of time talking about it, but he's got ideas on this front. On the other side of it, in speaking with players this week and over the last few weeks, there's going to be some winners and some losers. There's probably going to be a lot of losers in this scenario. If the schedule, as scarcity indicates, is going to be condensed, and that seems to be where they're headed right now, that means fewer playing opportunities. That means fewer spots for players on the PGA Tour. Whatever it is they create below the PGA Tour might be a good product, might be a place where you can develop your game, might be a place where you can make a decent living while you try to get to that next level. But there's going to be plenty of people who are hurt by this, not just players, but tournaments. If the PGA Tour schedule is going to go to 20 events, which I'm just throwing that number out there because that seems to be the popular one right now, that means roughly 20 events are going somewhere else, either away or to another tour. These are events that have been on the schedule for a long time. I'm not going to pick one out to pick on them, but you can sit and kind of go down the schedule yourself and decide exactly which events. Yep, that looks like scarcity to me. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, but if I look in the dictionary, that tournament is probably what it looks like. You're right. He's going to break a lot of eggs, to use Tiger Woods' terms, but most people, the people that seem to matter, feel like he's the right guy to do it.
Yeah, look, a new core tour product is really exciting if you can maximize the schedule between the Super Bowl and Labor Day. Best field, best courses, best times in the schedule. Like, I think all of that makes sense. The questions, though, are numerous. Middle class, what happens in the fall and winter? There's always this comp to the NFL and football, but you look at the NFL is trying to expand. The NFL dominates the landscape calendar year round with the draft and OTAs and free agency. They are still in the conversation. They don't just disappear for 4 or 5 months. So how the PGA Tour can, yes, have this core product, but still have a foothold, still sort of satiate the hardcore golf fan, I think is the biggest question as we move towards 2026. With the planned rollout for 2027, more to say on this in 2026 for sure.